So Dame Dash has been making comments lately, and I actually watched a video by a different creator here on this platform named Sara Bee, and so I'm making this video in response to Sara's comments. She has a video she uploaded titled Dame Dash Scares Me. You should check it out. And check her out. I really enjoy her takes. I like being subscribed to her channel, so definitely give Sara a watch, a listen, check out her channel. But at the end of her video, she poses a question to her audience where she asks, could you ever hate somebody as much as Dame Dash hates Jay-Z after having made millions with a person? And I think that's a relevant question to ask. I think that that would be a very pertinent question if posed by someone like Mace to a Diddy when reflecting on all of the artists that he has put into predatory deals or who he has lied to and deceived in order to exploit. And I don't think that it's an irrelevant question when speaking about Dame Dash and Jay-Z, but I wanted to make this video to sort of shed some additional light and contextualize this back and forth. Well, I mean, I don't even really know if you could call it a back and forth. I feel like Dame is just talking a lot to whoever will listen. And Jay is just, you know, he's a businessman. But it's not lost on me that in order to really recap where some of these issues started, I would have to reference things that happened more than 30 years ago. And it's very possible that Sara and her audience simply were not born at the time that these things were happening. They came in at a later part of the story, and so that's why they're not aware of some of these details. And I also want to be clear in saying that I'm not here to take up for Dame Dash. That's not what this video is. I want to provide some context and some explanation as to why he is saying some of the things that he's saying and acting in the way that he's acting, but that doesn't mean that I'm trying to make excuses for Dame in the slightest. I still think that he comes across as a very bitter person all these years later, and it's not a good look for him. Not to mention that both Dame Dash and Jay-Z are older than me. They have seen more than me. I'm pretty sure that these men would not care if I ran past them on fire. So that's not what this is. Don't read this as me trying to take up for any of these men, not at all. But I guess before I really jump into all of this, I should introduce myself. Hi, my name is Antoinette Chanel. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if this ain't your first rodeo. I think that Dame Dash feels cheated. I think that a lot of the comments that he aims at Jay-Z are framed under the guise of, well, he wouldn't have been able to do any of that if he hadn't met me and if he hadn't screwed me over. And so in order to really unpack this, we have to talk about the Roc deal. Roc-A-Fella Records was a record label established in 1994 with three key people: Jay-Z, Damon Dash, and Kareem Biggs Burke. And Roc-A-Fella signed and did projects for acts such as Jadakiss, Memphis Bleak, also someone named Kanye West. You might have heard of him. Now, Roc-A-Fella Records dissolved in 2013, but they did also have some subsidiaries. I've listed Roc Films here, as well as Roc La Familia, as two subsidiaries that existed under Roc-A-Fella Records. But in addition to the subsidiaries and the label itself, there was also additional Roc branded brands, if you will, that Dame and Jay-Z had collaborated on, specifically Roc-A-Wear. Roc-A-Wear was a clothing line that they launched together in 1999. I remember it being very huge when I was in high school and in college. And so the Roc brand, the Roc business venture, if you will, was something that sort of came about as this collaboration between the three men that I mentioned before, and Jay-Z and Dame had a lot of business dealings under that Roc label. And when I say label here, I'm not talking about music label, I'm just talking about like general category. They had a lot of business dealings together under this Roc label. So the story goes, and I say the story goes because this is much of the lore that goes into, you know, understanding the beef that Dame and Jay-Z seem to have with each other. But I want to also be clear that I grew up the only child of very strict, uptight Black parents in the 90s. So it's not like I was freely listening to rap music in my room, or I was able to follow these things as closely as I would have wanted to, because my parents were very strict about what I was listening to and how much MTV I could watch. But the general consensus of knowledge goes like this. In late 2004, Jay-Z invites Dame Dash to dinner. The subject of this dinner was supposed to be the two men discussing what the future of the Roc-A-Fella Records and Def Jam partnership was going to look like. Leading up to this, Dame had expressed issues with the Def Jam partnership, which I believe Def Jam was for distribution. But again, I'm not from that world, so I don't know all of the intricacies. But what you need to understand is that Roc-A-Fella and Def Jam were partnering together for projects, I think also for some concerts, and I think Dame felt like Def Jam was pocketing too much of the money from the deal. Like, they were not being represented fairly. They weren't earning as much as they should have been. He had issues with how that business was being run. And so the plan was to sell off Roc-A-Fella to Def Jam. And so that's what this dinner was supposed to be about, discussing the intricacies of that. And for all that Dame knew, allegedly at the time, he figured, okay, we're just going to sell this off and then move on to something else, I guess. What Dame didn't know was that after selling Roc-A-Fella and, you know, its remaining shares over to Def Jam, Jay-Z would be named president of Def Jam, making him the sole proprietor of Roc-A-Fella Records at that point, if he is the president of the company that it's now been sold to. And the general understanding, allegedly, is that Dame found out about this when Def Jam announced that Jay-Z was going to be their president. So he found out about it at the same time that the public found out about it. And if this went, if this actually happened the way that it's been explained, talked about, rumored, etc., then yeah, I could see how he would feel a little bit blindsided by that. Now, when I was doing my research, it was unclear whether or not Biggs knew about Jay-Z becoming president at Roc-A-Fella. For all we know, he was involved in all of the dealings for figuring out what the shares were going to look like when it sounds like Def Jam owned part of Roc-A-Fella at one point, and then they ended up selling the rest to them. He had to have been involved in all of those stages, signing off on paperwork at some point, but it's unclear if he was fully aware of what Jay-Z was planning to do. Okay, so that is the large piece of the business side of things that I want to talk about. The other part of this that I want to talk about is sort of, I mean, it depends on who you ask, I suppose. Some millennials feel like you're committing the ultimate sin to do this. Others, they couldn't care less. I personally think that we can't talk about Dame and his history and Jay-Z without also mentioning Aaliyah. So Dame was romantically linked to Aaliyah at the time of her death in 2001. We are approaching the 25-year anniversary of that death, and it blows me away because the pain still feels very fresh, and I don't know if anybody out here can relate to that, but if you can, let me know in the comments. Personally, my 9/11 Aaliyah left eye trauma is all wrapped together in one, and I only became aware of that recently, but I digress. Dame has stated in interviews that he and Aaliyah had plans to marry, that they had discussed having children. You know, from all accounts, the way that Dame tells it, they were definitely headed towards a beautiful and bright future together. And so what I want to be clear about at this point is that I think it's very obvious that just like us fans who were teens, young adults at the time that Aaliyah passed away, just like we feel pain from that and we feel trauma, I'm sure that Dame has probably also carried trauma from that huge, significant loss. And if things really were as he claims that they were planning for a bright future together, having all of that snatched away from you with little explanation as to why, I can see why that would drive someone crazy as well. But what I really don't want to do, and I really get annoyed when I see people doing this in comments elsewhere, I don't want to make the suggestion that if Aaliyah was still alive, then Dame would be doing so much better. And, none of this would have happened with Jay-Z. That is all speculation. And I think it's also very unfair to imply that Aaliyah's legacy needs to be anybody's but her own. It's very sad that in the midst of their relationship, Aaliyah was taken tragically. But we don't know for certain that if she hadn't died then, that her and Dame would have gone on to marry, that they would have had kids together. For all we know, they would have dated for another 6 months and then broken up. I think that it's really unfair to suggest that because Aaliyah passed away and they were romantically linked, well, that is free license for why Dame gets to act up and act out and, be a hater and always criticize people that he doesn't like openly as they're doing things publicly. I mean, I don't really like that narrative either. That to me is very similar to the Kanye Donda West theory. The one where people say that, oh, Kanye lost his mind after his mother passed away, and that's why he has gone crazy, and why he wears White Lives Matter shirts, and why he is, a Nazi at this point, and he spouts anti-Semitic rhetoric and things like that. Like, no, okay, Donda West passed away in November of 2007, so look at that. We're coming up on the 20-year anniversary of her passing as well. Surely Kanye can't be still reeling from that. Surely that can't still be the excuse that people are wanting to pass off for why this guy is such a nut job. And so I think to use Aaliyah's passing to say that that's an excuse for why Dame is the way that he is, I'm not really feeling that. I don't want to do that. I think that that allows an excuse of his behavior that's way too easy and convenient. No, Dame is out here being a hater because I believe that when he looks at Jay-Z, what Jay-Z's brand is today in 2026, I believe that he sees remnants of what he could have had. And I think that that makes him very, very bitter. Again, we can only speculate about these things, but we know that Aaliyah was prominent with Black audiences and even audiences of other races. She had that crossover appeal. One of the last projects that she did was Romeo Must Die, and she was starring opposite Jet Li in that movie. That was huge for not only her career, her visibility, but also breaking across racial barriers. So I can see where Dame might speculate that if he and Aaliyah had stayed together, they might be one of those on top couples. In Dame's mind, yeah, I think that that's what he thinks. Now, do audiences feel the same way? I know audiences loved Aaliyah, but I don't know if we would be loving Dame the same way that he might think. I don't know if he would have been as likable of a figure as she would have been. But then again, I don't think Jay-Z's a very likable figure either, yet Beyonce makes him palatable to people a lot of times. But that power couple dynamic, that public power couple dynamic, I think that that's something that Dame admires and probably speculates that he might have had a shot at if he and Aaliyah would have had a longer run, possibly. I also think that Dame never got over that Roc-A-Fella deal. And I think every single one of us can relate to a situation where you got slighted, where you didn't get as much credit, or you weren't paid as much, or you didn't get as many accolades, whatever it is, as somebody else who you might perceive as not as deserving because they didn't work as hard. They didn't go through all the things I went through. They didn't put in as much as I did. I think that's just part of the human experience to have that at some point in your life. But many of us have those experiences when we're young, when we're, in our teens and our 20s. Maybe if you're a late bloomer, you're also having those in your 30s, but at some point you get the opportunity to learn that if I sit in the victimhood of what happened to me, then all it makes me is angry and bitter and triggered and jealous and spewing ugliness because I feel like other people's personal achievements are a slight towards me. At some point, we all learned that you have to move on from things. If you live solidly in the moment of the car crash, or when your loved one died, or when you got screwed out of a deal when you were trying to buy that house, or that business that you wanted to get off the ground, but then those other two partners screwed you out of the deal and took your money. You have to move on from that, because is that all that you want to become? That would be the question that I would want to ask Dame Dash. Is this all that you want to become? Simply just the shadow of what could have been if Jay-Z hadn't screwed you over in that deal? Because quiet as it's kept, Dame Dash has some accolades to his name too. Wasn't it Dame who wanted to sign Kanye? Like, didn't Dame recognize Kanye's I gotta look that up, but I could have sworn I heard someone say that it's because of Dame that Jay-Z even had Kanye as an artist. Or was that just because Kanye decided to go towards Jay after the Roc-A-Fella? I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments. That's part of the lore that I'm not up on, but I've heard rumblings about it, which is why I'm asking. Dame has said in interviews, he's alluded to projects he has coming up, promotions he's gotten, positions that he holds in very prominent companies, but oftentimes when we try to follow up with that to see, well, where's that leading and how come nobody else is confirming this, we end up with crickets. Similarly, this outburst against Jay-Z and 2026 Jay-Z's antics, these are not the only instances that I can point to of Dame Dash just acting really, really bitter. I can point to an incident that I think happened all the way back in 2019. I think this was pre-COVID. But Dame Dash walks up on Lee Daniels at some event. I don't know what they were there for, if it was an award show, what was going on. But it looked like it was some type of intermission because all the lights were on. And here you see Dame Dash walking up on Lee Daniels to talk to Lee Daniels about some money that he owes him, that he has owed him for a while. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that if somebody owes you money, you should just let that go. Absolutely not. But Dame, if Lee owes you money, then take that asshole to court. Why are you sitting here stocking up on this man at what appears to be either a play or an award show? Everyone seems to be having a good time and relaxing. Just because you have access to him doesn't mean that this is the most opportune time for you to approach him about something like that. And again, with your stature for as long as you've been in the business, you know how to legally go about doing something like that. So just take that route, Dame. You don't have to be out here hunting people down for your money yourself. But overall, if I could give some encouragement or some guidance, I would say that it would be great for Dame to turn inward and journey inward to become more curious about himself, what other talents he has, what other things he enjoys, and start getting excited about things that are significant to you. Not indicative of anybody else's behavior, anybody else saying anything, doing anything. Simply, I get to go do this thing that I love, and that brings me joy. And this doesn't mean you have to be the best at it either. I am not the best runner in the world. I'm not the fastest. I'm not the most efficient. I probably could use some better methods for how I train, all of that. But I love running because running makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to get out and just have something to do where I'm by myself and get a chance to think and just process through things. That's why I run, because I enjoy it. I enjoy what it does for me, not because, oh, I get to show stats to other people and I'm faster than this person. Those are all of my thoughts, friends. I really just wanted to unpack some of the history between Dame and Jay, talk a little bit about where I think some of this bitterness for him is coming from, acknowledge that he probably does have some emotional trauma trauma. He's probably feeling some losses that have not been processed through as evidenced by his behavior. And I hope that he can work on that and get the help. That is his personal responsibility, though, not anybody else's. We can give grace, sure, but it's his responsibility to make sure that he addresses that and heals from that in order to be a healthy and well-adjusted person. There's a phrase that it's not your fault if you are effed up, but it is your fault if you stay effed up. At this point, it's been over 30 years for some of these things, and I think that Dame is choosing to stay effed up rather than growing from it.
Cheap teeth, cheap teeth, cheap teeth, cheap teeth, cheap teeth, cheap teeth.
I'd love to hear your comments down below. Also, check out Sara Bee's channel, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video. And thanks so much for being here, friends. I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more from me, consider hitting that subscribe button so you can see all my playlists and get notified every time I upload to this channel. If you want to keep up with behind the scenes lifestyle stuff, you can follow me on Threads. Take care.